My name's Alex Carter, and this happened to me just a few months ago. I worked the night shift at a distribution center in Columbus, Ohio. I've been on overnights for years, so even on my days off, I keep the same schedule. My body clock's too stubborn to flip back to normal. That night started like any other. I clocked out around 3:45 a.m., grabbed a coffee from the 24-hour gas station down the road, and headed home. The streets were empty, not a single car all the way through my neighborhood. It was the kind of quiet that makes you notice how loud your own tires sound. As I turned onto Maple Hollow Drive, I saw a vehicle parked just past my driveway. It was an old silver Crown Vic with dark, almost mirror-like tint. No lights, no license plate on the front bumper. It looked dead, but the way it was angled, pulled in tight against the curb near my mailbox, made me slow down. I told myself it was probably nothing, someone visiting a neighbor or a rideshare driver taking a nap. Still, it felt off. I pulled into my garage, shut the door, and peeked through the blinds. The car just sat there, no movement. By the time I got inside, brushed my teeth, and checked again from the living room window, it was gone. Weird, but not a crime. I went to bed. The next night was my Friday. I was looking forward to sleeping in the next morning. My shift dragged, and I didn't get out until almost 4:15 a.m. Driving home, I noticed how clear the sky was. The moon was so bright it made the frost sparkle on lawns. And then, like deja vu, that same Crown Vic was parked in the exact same spot. I crept by slow, trying to see inside, but the tint turned the windows into black mirrors. After parking in my garage, I hesitated. Curiosity overruled caution, so I walked to the end of the driveway. For a second, I thought I saw a shapeshift inside, just a flicker near the back seat. Maybe a reflection, maybe not. I froze, heart racing. I didn't want to get closer, so I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the rear plate. The flash bounced off the glass, and I almost expected someone to fling the door open. Nothing happened. I hustled back inside and locked up. Around 5 a.m., I checked from my kitchen window. The car was gone again. The third night should have been peaceful. I was off work and planned to stay up late gaming. I woke around 7 p.m., made some pasta, then decided to clear my head with a walk around the block. The air was crisp, and the neighborhood felt deserted. When I left, the street out front was empty. When I got back an hour later, the Crown Vic was there. My stomach flipped. It hadn't just returned, it was waiting. This time I marched right up, shielding my eyes against the window with my hand. Inside, nothing. No backpack, no jacket, no hint that anyone had ever been there. The interior looked too clean, like a rental car or something staged. I stood there debating whether to call the cops, but technically, the car wasn't trespassing, it was on public road. Frustrated, I went inside. My phone was charging on the nightstand, and when I picked it up, a notification lit the screen. Motion detected living room camera. My blood went cold. I've got a small security setup, a doorbell cam, one on the back deck, and 3 inside living room, hallway, and office. The alert didn't say which one, so I opened the app. There was a 1-minute clip saved. For the first 55 seconds, everything was still. Then, at the bottom edge of the frame, something moved fast. Just the top of someone's head and the curve of a shoulder, ducking out of sight. The timestamp? 8:42 p.m. I was standing in that same living room at 8:45, looking at my phone. I turned slowly, scanning the corners. The air felt heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath. Every creak of the floor seemed amplified. Someone was inside. I forced myself to move, stepping lightly toward the hallway. That's when a floorboard groaned behind me. I whipped around nothing, but then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow at first, then quick, pounding toward me from the kitchen. Instinct took over. I bolted for the front door, yanking it open so hard it slammed the wall. Cold air hit me as I sprinted across the yard and into the line of trees beyond my fence. Branches scratched at my face while I ran deeper into the woods. Only when my lungs burned did I dare look back. The streetlight outside my house glowed faintly through the branches. I couldn't see anyone, but I couldn't shake the feeling they were there, just out of sight. I called 911 with trembling hands. A dispatcher kept me on the line until deputies arrived. From my hiding spot, I watched their flashlights sweep across my yard. By the time they cleared the house, the car was gone. The deputies took my statement and asked to see the license plate photo. They ran it while I sat wrapped in a blanket on the tailgate of one of their SUVs. An hour later, a call came through. They'd found the car abandoned behind a gas station 2 towns over. Inside was a man in his mid-20s, clearly strung out and unstable. He had burglary tools, gloves, and disturbingly, a tablet full of notes. My name, address, screenshots of my social media, and even a rough schedule of when I left and returned from work. There were pictures too. Shots of my house at night, zoomed through the living room windows. Screenshots of my security feeds somehow. He'd managed to access a few cameras without setting off alerts. The scariest part? Nobody knows how long he'd been inside before that clip caught him. Maybe that was the first night, or maybe I'd been sleeping a few feet from him for weeks. He was booked on stalking, breaking and entering, and a few other charges. The deputies promised he wouldn't be out anytime soon. I moved out of that house a month later. I just couldn't shake the feeling that walls could hide anyone, that blinds might be eyes staring back. Sometimes, when I drive past Maple Hollow on my way home from work, I slow down. The new owners keep the porch light on all night, but the curb near the mailbox is always empty. I don't know if that helps them sleep. For me, the memory of that Silver Crown Vic still crawls up my spine, a reminder that the scariest monsters aren't ghosts or legends. Sometimes, they're just people, waiting in the dark for you to come home. It's been almost 5 years since this happened, and I still get chills every time a heavy storm rolls through. Back then, I was living just outside Wichita, Kansas, working nights as a rideshare driver to pick up extra cash. Driving was easy money for me. I liked the quiet highways, late night music, and the freedom to choose my hours. Stormy nights were usually dead though. Most people stayed inside, so I'd spend hours either looping through empty streets or sitting in a grocery store parking lot, listening to podcasts and waiting for a request. Even 1 or 2 fares could make the night worth it. That night, the rain was relentless. Thunder rolled across the flat plains, and the wind howled loud enough to rattle the car doors. Around 9:30 p.m., I'd been sitting in a lot off Rock Road, windshield wipers squeaking back and forth, thinking maybe I should just head home. Then my phone buzzed with a ride request. Pickup. 27 minutes away. Destination: another 20 minutes beyond that. Normally, I wouldn't take a call that far, but there were no other drivers on the map, and I had nothing better to do. So, I accepted and started the long drive east. The GPS led me away from the city lights, out toward the edge of Butler County. The farther I went, the more isolated it got. Fields stretched out on both sides, dotted by the occasional cluster of trees. Street lamps grew rare, and the storm only made it creepier. After about half an hour, the app announced I'd arrived. I slowed to a stop at a lonely crossroads, surrounded by farmland and a barbed wire fence. My headlights illuminated the rain-soaked gravel, but there wasn't a soul in sight. No houses, no barns. Just dark fields and sheets of rain slanting sideways in the wind. I checked the screen to confirm the spot right on the corner of County Road 46 and Maple Hollow Lane. I figured maybe my passenger was running late, so I left the hazards blinking and sent a quick text. "Hey, I'm here. Where should I meet you?" I'd barely looked back up when a shape appeared in my driver's side mirror. A man was walking out of the storm, his hood plastered to his head, water dripping from his sleeves. I hadn't seen him approach 1 second the road was empty. The next, he was right there. He yanked the rear door open and slid into the middle seat, leaving muddy streaks on the vinyl. "Evening," I said, trying to hide how much he'd startled me. "Are you Chris?" "Yeah," he muttered. His voice was low, almost drowned out by the rain. As I pulled back onto the road, I adjusted the mirror. The guy sat perfectly centered on the back seat, staring straight ahead, water pooling at his feet. Something about him set my nerves on edge. He wasn't wearing typical storm gear, no umbrella, no heavy coat, just a thin black hoodie and jeans soaked through. His skin looked pale under the dome light, and his eyes flicked up to meet mine every few seconds in the mirror. For a while, the only sounds were the wipers and the drumming of rain on the roof. I felt like I should say something, maybe break the tension. "So," I asked lightly, "were you out visiting somebody? Pretty rough night to be walking." Chris didn't answer at first. He turned his head toward the side window, then back to me, his gaze flat. "Just needed a ride," he finally said. That was it. No laugh, no shrug, nothing to make the mood less weird. We drove deeper into the countryside. The storm made it hard to see more than 20 feet ahead, and every few minutes lightning lit up the cab in harsh white. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why would anyone be standing at a random intersection in the middle of farmland during a storm like this? At one point, I glanced in the rear view again. Chris had leaned slightly forward, elbows resting on his knees, watching me. His expression hadn't changed, serious, maybe even angry. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. My gut screamed that I should keep this ride short. "Where exactly do you want to go?" I asked, hoping to get a landmark. Chris looked out the window again, like he was checking for something in the dark. "Just up ahead," he said finally. "I'll tell you when." His tone was clipped, final. A few more miles crawled by. The road narrowed, trees closing in on either side. My pulse thudded in my ears. Then, abruptly, Chris leaned forward. "Pull over, right here." I slowed, glancing around. We were in the middle of nowhere, no driveway, no mailbox, just trees bending under the storm. "You sure?" I asked. "Here," he repeated, sharper this time. I eased the car onto the muddy shoulder and stopped. Chris reached for the handle, but then paused. His eyes flicked to the center console, where my phone displayed the trip details: his name, pickup point, license plate, everything. He froze for a heartbeat, studying the screen. Then he slid his hand into his pocket, pulling out his own phone. The way his thumb hovered over it made the hair on my arms rise. I realized, all at once, that he might be weighing something in his head. Whether leaving any record of himself was worth whatever else he'd been planning. My voice cracked the silence. "Hey, no worries about the fare," I said quickly. "I'll cancel the trip so you don't get charged." I forced a small laugh, like it was no big deal. Happens all the time. His eyes lingered on mine in the mirror. For a few seconds, I couldn't read if he believed me. Finally, Chris shoved his phone back in his pocket, opened the door, and stepped into the rain. Without another word, he disappeared into the dark. The second the door clicked shut, I floored the gas. My tires spun in the mud before catching traction, and I sped back toward the highway, heart pounding so hard it hurt. I didn't stop until I reached a lit gas station 15 miles away. My hands were trembling as I reported the ride through the app, then called the county sheriff. Days went by with no updates. I almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. Maybe he'd just been an odd guy hitching a ride. Then, the sheriff's office called. A woman had gone missing that same night, last seen near a hiking trail about a mile from where I'd picked Chris up. Search teams found nothing, no footprints, no clues, no trace of Chris either. The officer told me, "As of right now, you're the last verified person to see him." That sent a chill through me like nothing else. Even now, whenever storms sweep across the plains, I remember those minutes in the car, the way Chris watched me in the mirror, the silent calculations behind his eyes, the way he melted into the rain. Maybe he was just a drifter caught in bad weather. Maybe he was something much worse. All I know is, if I hadn't shown him that I could cancel the ride, I might have been another unsolved case in the files of Butler County. So these days, when the app pings me with a ride request in the middle of nowhere during a storm, I let it ring. No fare is worth gambling with whatever I picked up that night on Maple Hollow Lane. It happened on what I thought would be an ordinary Wednesday in early March. I'd just clocked out from my shift at Harrison Equipment Rentals on the west side of Knoxville, Tennessee. My job keeps me moving between the warehouse and the yard, loading trailers and helping customers with heavy tools. By the end of a long rainy day, I'm usually wiped. That afternoon, the rain hadn't let up once. Fat, cold drops hammered the tin roof over the yard, and every trip outside left me drenched despite the hooded jacket. By 6 o'clock, I couldn't wait to get home, take off my soaked boots, and relax. My drive took about 30 minutes, winding past open farmland and patches of forest. My place sits off a narrow gravel road, about 4 miles from the nearest gas station. I like the quiet out there most of the time. When I turned onto my driveway, the first thing I noticed was the mud. Days of rain had turned the gravel into a slick mess. The second thing I noticed stopped me cold. A set of fresh tire tracks leading all the way up to my porch. That was odd. I don't get many visitors, and I hadn't ordered anything. I figured maybe the postal carrier pulled in to turn around, but there weren't any packages waiting by the door. I parked, grabbed my lunchbox, and hustled inside, shaking the rain off my jacket. The place smelled faintly of damp wood, normal for a stormy night. I changed into sweatpants and a dry t-shirt, then wandered into the kitchen to fix a sandwich. Around 7:30, while scrolling on my phone and half watching an old episode of Mythbusters, I thought I heard a knock near the front door. Just one. Quiet tap so faint, I wasn't sure it was real over the drumming rain. I paused the TV and listened. Nothing. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked to the door, opened it, and got blasted by wind and water. The porch was empty. Beyond that, the yard melted into darkness, the rain swallowing everything. I shut the door quickly. Probably my imagination, I told myself, or maybe a branch tossed by the wind. Back on the couch, I tried to relax, but something gnawed at me. Maybe it was the earlier tracks in the driveway. Maybe the knock had been real. Either way, the storm outside suddenly felt heavier, like it was pressing against the windows. About an hour later, I got up to use the bathroom. As I walked behind the couch, I froze. There was a muddy smudge on the white tile floor. Not a big one, just enough to stand out. I never wear my work boots inside, and I'd cleaned up my own footprints by the door. A chill crept up my back. I fetched a rag and wiped it, but the unease didn't budge. The spot was right behind where I'd been sitting. Whoever or whatever had left it would have been standing less than 3 feet from me. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I'd missed it earlier. Maybe I was just spooking myself. Still, when I returned to the couch, I couldn't relax. The way the living room faced the rest of the house suddenly felt wrong, like there was too much empty space behind me. Eventually, I gave up and went upstairs to my bedroom. At least there, with the bed tucked against the wall, I could see the whole room. I flicked on the small TV across from the bed and put on a sitcom, hoping the background chatter would drown my nerves. 20 minutes later, I'd almost convinced myself I'd overreacted until I heard a faint thump outside my door. Not loud, just a quick, muted sound. I sat up, heart hammering. After a moment of arguing with myself, I crept to the door and pressed my ear against it. Silence. I told myself I had 2 choices: ignore it and risk not knowing, or open the door and face whatever was there. I turned the knob. The hallway stretched ahead, empty, except for the shadows thrown by the lamplight. The only other room upstairs was the little office I used as a library. Its door was closed, like always. I was about to head back when the TV downstairs suddenly blared the same show I'd paused earlier, now at full volume. The sound filled the house, bouncing off the walls. My blood went cold. I sprinted down the hall, nearly slipping on the hardwood, then pounded down the stairs. The living room glowed blue from the screen. I scanned the corners, expecting someone to leap out. Nothing. I edged closer to the set, knifeless and trembling, and switched it off using the button on the back. The quiet afterward was deafening, broken only by rain against the windows. Every hair on my neck stood up. Someone had to have turned it on. I never keep the remote on the floor, and I'd left it on the coffee table. That's when common sense finally kicked in. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest chef's knife I own. Then I started clearing the house, every closet, every corner, nothing downstairs. With my pulse thudding in my ears, I climbed the stairs again. The office door loomed at the end of the hallway. I hadn't opened it in weeks. I inched it open. The room smelled faintly of dust and paper. Everything seemed undisturbed. Books on the shelves, boxes stacked in the corner. Then I saw it. Lying on the rug near the closet was the remote control for the downstairs TV. My stomach flipped. I bolted. Down the hall, down the stairs, straight out the front door into the rain. My hands shook as I called 911. 2 deputies from the county sheriff's office arrived about 15 minutes later. They swept the house while I waited in their cruiser, trying not to imagine someone slipping out through the woods as the siren approached. When they came back, their faces were serious. One of the locks on a downstairs window had been forced. A few muddy prints led from that window toward the hallway and then stopped. Whoever it was had probably been inside all evening. The deputies figured the person drove up my driveway earlier, maybe knocked to check if anyone was home, then left when I didn't answer. Later, after dark, they must have returned, slipped in through the window, and watched me from the shadows. What they wanted, no one could say. Nothing was missing. No vandalism, no note. Just footprints, a broken lock, and that remote proof that while I'd been sitting on the couch, they'd been close enough to grab it. The scariest thought is how carefully they moved. They didn't try to attack, didn't steal anything. They just lurked, waiting, maybe enjoying the power of being unseen. If the TV hadn't come on, I might have walked right into that office, closing the distance between us without knowing. Or worse, maybe they would have slipped out behind me. I didn't sleep in that house for 2 nights. A buddy let me crash on his couch while I installed new locks and cameras. Even now, months later, I still check the driveway every time I get home. Rainy nights make me especially uneasy. Sometimes I swear I hear that single, quiet knock echoing in my head. Whoever was inside my home that night is still out there, and I can't shake the feeling they're waiting for another storm.